in terms of game two, um, the three biggest things that I saw was one, the Heat made more shots, especially threes, right? So that's the most obvious thing that people are going to see. Um, Two, the Heat were much more willing to switch the Bam Jimmy pick and roll whenever they were guarding Jokic and Murray. So um game one, they did not switch. Like basically Bam guarded Jokic for the majority of the time, right?
Mhm.
And Jimmy guarded Murray. Now when Jokic and Murray played the pick and roll game, their two man game, the Heat were much more willing to switch have Jimmy guard Jokic. Now, by no means that did Jimmy guarding Jokic like slow down Jokic, but what he did was he made it difficult for like Jokic to find passing angles, and he also made it impossible for him to get the ball back to Murray to create offense. So basically, it was essentially playing 4-on-4, right?
Mhm.
Now that basically forced Jokic to score more because he took because he took away his best offensive option, and they forced and with Jimmy forced Jokic to be more perimeter oriented because Jokic couldn't drive on Jimmy much at all. So that forced Jokic to score a lot, which he did score a lot, right? But that's one defensive change that he did was always switch on that two main game with Murray and like Jokic. And then the third thing was from what I saw was um the perimeter players other than Gordon for the Nuggets, they were making a lot of just mental mistakes. Like they were missing a lot of backdoor cuts. Um, they were getting confused on dribble handoff threes. Like when Bam would just do a dribble handoff to like a Duncan Robinson or to Gabe Vincent, like the perimeter players for the Nuggets would go under the screen or lose Gabe Vincent or Robinson or Lowry or whoever it was. So a lot of defensive lapses by the perimeter players of the Nuggets. And for
Mhm.
me, that's basically how the Heat won this game is because they hit more threes, especially in the fourth quarter. People are talking about Duncan Robinson going off like that. Those 4 or 5 plays of him hitting threes and him going on those backdoor cuts and drives, those were defensive lapses by the perimeter players of the Nuggets, right? And Miami doing the Bam Jimmy switch on the
Mhm.
pick and roll really helped them kind of force Jokic to score more. So that's what I saw. But what did you see and what did you think?
No, yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you. The Heat had great looks in game one. They were just missing all of their shots despite having great looks, and the Nuggets were just able to capitalize on that. Honestly, but in addition to that, I mean, I think I think you also have to credit the Nuggets for just being able to slash their defense because they had huge runs. They're up big for most of the game in game one, and everyone was essentially writing off the Heat. Like, is the finals over yet, or is the finals already over? Like, it doesn't look like the Heat are going to be able to compete. And honestly, I think most people were thinking that considering just the overall team composition of both teams, right? So even including us, we both thought that the Nuggets would more or less run over the Heat to some degree. But from what we saw in game two, as you mentioned earlier, the Heat finally hit their shots. And I think one interesting thing that they did was they actually played Kevin Love this game. So instead of having him on the bench, he had 10 boards, which definitely helps a lot. Three offensive boards, seven defensive rebounds. I think that helped. In addition to his two threes, definitely helped a lot. I think one thing I also wanted to highlight, what kind of keeps the Heat in contention for winning games in the series, is also Bam actually scoring a decent amount and playing pretty well. I thought he was going to get annihilated playing against Jokic, but he scored over 20 points these past two games. So, credit to him. He had a great game too as well. With 9 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 blocks. So shooting at a pretty efficient rate at 57%. So big thing. And then I also wanted to touch upon your point with Duncan Robinson as well, right? Hitting threes. That's something that we all know him. He's a known shooter, right? That's his role. He's a jump shooter. He hits threes, and he's done that well. especially in the fourth quarter of game two. But I think when you mentioned the backdoor cuts and you mentioned the drive earlier, like I think the reason why their defensive lapses is I just don't think the Denver Nuggets were prepared for that. Like, well,
Yeah.
how often do you actually see Duncan Robinson cut or drive? Almost never, right? Because his role is usually, he'll stand somewhere. I mean, he can hit more than just corner threes. He can hit three pretty much anywhere in the perimeter,
Yeah.
right? And so that's kind of what they're accustomed to and how they're normally going to guard Duncan, right? It's like the non-active um as a non-active offensive player until someone else on the team is able to draw a double, right? Whether it's Bam, whether it's Jimmy, and then once they get that double, whoever the player has the ball will kick it out to Duncan. Duncan will have a wide open shot. It's kind of
Yeah.
how it's typically played. So I think I wanted to make that point as well. And then in addition to that, obviously with Gabe Vincent having a great series so far, and also with great contribution from Strus and yeah, I think that's about it. Caleb Martin didn't have a great game, but he had a decent game one. And
He had a big three like late in the fourth quarter to like help the Heat get some cushion. It was like a fading three on the left corner. I think that got the Heat lead back up to 6, I believe. Because towards the last 3 minutes, whatever, like the Nuggets went on a run. So that three helped him. So he only made one shot, but it was a very timely shot. And just to follow up on one thing about the Duncan Robinson piece, and it kind of consolidates your point about Robinson, about how he played a very unconventional game in the first 5 minutes of the fourth quarter, and how these Nuggets kind of have these lapses. So Duncan Robinson and he made that run in the fourth quarter with Jimmy on the bench. So and the lapses that like they had with him getting open shots, him on his drives and his back door, like it wasn't just defensive lapses, but it was also just offensively too, because Jimmy was off the floor and so was Jokic. So Denver couldn't take advantage of like literally like the Heat not having their best player on the floor, right? Because if you think about it, if they take advantage of those 4 or 5 minutes, the game's over because they were up by 10, right?
right.
And so if they don't make those 3 or 4 mental lapses with the backdoor from Duncan, giving up, letting him get open from 3 on the left wing, they don't. If they just concentrate on those 2 or 3 plays, score on the other end, the game's over. So like literally like those lapses, especially in the beginning of the fourth quarter, that basically changed the entire game.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, it was a 3-point game at the end of the day, and honestly, it was just Murray missed the last shot, so it
Yeah.
could have honestly tied. It could have been a tie game and went to overtime. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of exciting basketball to watch still. And honestly, at this point in time, I don't necessarily think I'm going to change the winner of the series. Right, I still think the Nuggets are going to win, but this might be a longer series than we initially thought.
Yeah, man. Like the Nuggets played poorly if you exclude Jokic, but as a team in game two, they almost had a 50-48-90 split as a team. So this is them playing not that well, and they still almost got 50-40-90 as a team. So um I I don't, and they still haven't scored more than 108 points yet this entire series, which you know I think they've averaged 116 117 points per game during the playoffs. So I do think that the Nuggets, assuming that they can kind of fix some of these mental lapses and execute a little bit better on offense, I do think that we are due for a really big offensive explosion from the Nuggets. But having said all that, like I've seen the Heat just have all these unconventional, unpredictable games against the Bucks and the Celtics, and now against the Nuggets. So it's a little wonky, for lack of a better term.